Good morning and welcome to Mecca Live here on Friday, August 21st, 2020. I'm so glad that you were able to join in with us. Again, we will be posting this link to the Mecca Facebook group page and the Mecca Facebook page. So we'll be posting this link there. So if you're unable to, if you want to see some of the things that we've done prior to utilizing the YouTube platform, just feel free to go to the Mecca Facebook group page and the Mecca Facebook page. And that's making engaging community connections accessible. We did a video earlier where we discussed how this came to come, how this came to pass, why we started it, and what the intention was, and then also how it has evolved. So I want to continue to um, illuminate how we did it on Facebook, and following that format will probably be the most beneficial as we progress forward. So generally on Fridays, we like to take a moment and just reflect on our week. What are the things that worked well? What are the things that we might want to do differently next week? But always in gratitude and thankfulness of the fact that one, we've made it to the end of the week, but then also that we have the ability in the faculties to be able to assess and evaluate our weaknesses and our strengths, and together pull those two together in a way that we're able to map out a better plan or map out a more efficient plan. And sometimes when we're thinking about what's more efficient, what's better, and what we can tighten up, doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong, right? Sometimes we are able to recognize that there's something that we can do even better than we've done before without it being necessarily the result of a failure or the result of a shortcoming or anything like that. And as we to put that in perspective, think about the cell phone, right? The cell phones continue to have different features and more features. And what is better? Yeah, because now it can do more things. That doesn't mean that it was bad in the first place, right? The same thing with cars and different things of that nature. So why would we allow other people, places, and things to invest that type of ingenuity into items and things and products that don't have breath, that don't have a soul, that don't have dreams and aspirations and creativity and imagination and inspiration? Why would we do that, right? So utilizing just a piece of that same kind of mindset, using just a piece of those strategies and skills to then turn it inward so that we can be the best person we can be. Why wouldn't we do that? And so that's kind of how we begin Fridays, the Friday sessions, but then also kind of as a launch pad, right? A launching point to go into our weekend. And hopefully your weekend will include some kind of rest, whatever rest means for you, and some kind of time and space for yourself, specifically as it relates to self-care. Sometimes self-care is just not doing anything. Sometimes our weeks are so packed that having a time and space where we can just is respite enough. And so it doesn't remember your self care, how you embrace your weekend and your times off, and hopefully you have time off, but how you embrace that doesn't have to look like anybody else's, right? I just encourage you to stay legal and make sure that you are respecting yourself and others. But that's just like a side note. But um, in all seriousness, being sure that we have time and space for just us doing the things that we enjoy doing that give us life. So on that note, I told my son that um, I have three paintings I need to finish, um, and I figured this week that I would, if I start, yeah, to finish. So three of them are started. One is just sketched out, but the rest of the other two I've already begun painting them. So I knew how busy this week was going to be, so I said, hey, you know what I'll do? I will do a bit at a time. And they still sit right there. I'm like, you know what? I know what I'm doing this weekend. Excuse me. I drank some water and it went down the wrong pipe, and I thought I had resolved that before I went live, but my apologies. And so I said, I don't care what happens. I'm painting this weekend. So whatever those things are to give you life, if it's being outside, if it's going fishing, whether you catch anything or not, those things come back to those spaces, because that's how we recharge, and that's how we get rejuvenated. And sometimes that's just where our peace is, right? So I just want to put that out there. Um, I'm trying to think here. I think that where I am right now is Southwest Florida. So the last time I checked, about an hour ago, there were two big storms headed our way too. I looked and I was like, I don't ever recall seeing two at the same time coming at the same, the trajectory at the same. So I was like, wow. The joke was growing up. that at some point, and at the time, the joke was related to the sea level. But the joke growing up was at some point, Florida is just going to be washed off the map. It's just going to dissolve because talking about the sea level. But I'm looking at that like I remember that conversation, when I was young. Maybe this will be the time. So I'm only saying that in jest a little bit because there's a lot of things happening across the nation. But um, the public school system is scheduled to reopen on the 31st of August. We have a lot of things happening election wise. Um, Still pretty high numbers here in Southwest Florida as it relates to COVID-19. And these two storms are coming. So, yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So, being able to stop and try to inspire and smile and encourage, that's what we do here. So, with that being said, let's just get right into it. I want to let you know, though, I will be making a reference to Schoolhouse Rock. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm gonna need you to look it up because your at home work has something to do with that. So let's just go ahead and get into it. We shouldn't go over 30 minutes. That's the plan is for us to secure this information, provide what we've said, what we've scheduled and outlined within 30 minutes. So it doesn't take too much of your time. In the event that I approach 30 minutes, I will let you know and say, hey, if you need to come back and watch this at a different time, then please do so. Okay, so again, this ends our week's theme of public news and private news. Today's topic is knowledge is power, and um, the reason for this is we're talking about having accurate intel. We're talking about meaning specifically for this one parents and caregivers of school age children. Um, Having accurate intel, understanding how everything works, but also, I may not know all the ins and outs and all the nuances as it relates to what my children are doing, but having um, points of contact. If I have a question, if I want to know, you know, why the grade is this way, or how is this processing in school, or do we have academic plans, and whatever the case may be, who are the people that have those answers? And so having those names and numbers, not just current, but also accessible so that, those questions can be explained and answered to your satisfaction, but moreover, toward the benefit of your child's academic career. That's what, it behooves us to be in that position. So the focus or the main point of this topic is what we don't know about our children's education plan and their academic history can be detrimental toward their academic career. So what am I talking about? Honestly, in general. And as we look at how education has had to morph and change and adapt, not education, excuse me, the methods of education, how it's had to change and morph and adapt in relation to our response and its response to COVID-19. A lot of students began attending school remotely that never have before, never have prior, right? So what did that mean? That meant that parents that were never directly responsible for administering education for multiple subjects, that was new for them as well. And so this was a learning process. We were all on a learning curve. Even many of the teachers and many of the institutions that are virtual in nature, they too had a learning curve because it wasn't just how classes were being taught and how this information was being disseminated. It was also all the other parts of the institution that were impacted by COVID-19. Some people had offices that whittled down to a couple of people in the office. So what did that mean if I have transcripts that are going back and forth? What did that mean if I needed to contact someone to set up an appointment? Now we have to make sure we have virtual platforms and things of that nature. So a lot of things were in flux that weren't very clear to I don't want to say the naked eye, but just on the surface, right? We think going to school, they put their lunch pail down, they start doing their schoolwork, they have recess, and they come home. There are many other pieces, many other moving pieces behind that. And so that's just in general. But as we talk specifically about education plans and we talk about academic history, we talk about the what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it, but when we look at K through 12, right, that's 13 years of school. I'm not talking about preschool because then you add something there too, but K through 12 is 13 years of school. And so when we look at that, many things happen along the way, right? Sometimes the family dynamics change. Sometimes we have situations where we're not quite sure if this is the best school, if this is the best format. Sometimes we say, well, public school, private school, public school, charter school, home ed, virtual. Like we have all these different avenues and ways to facilitate learning toward diplomas, toward whether it's a standard diploma, whatever the case may be. We have this. That's how this whole education piece begins. But a lot of times, like I said, along the way, things change, right? Sometimes our kids may have medical issues or accidents or something that arrives or happens or impacts the process of learning in a way that changes how we deliver this service of education, right? And so, what am I talking about right now? Because I want to put it like that because I hear often, all too often, I hear IEP, I hear 504, and I hear gifted in this, they're over there kind of thing. Understand this, and I probably will do it again at a later point. We did, prior to arriving at the YouTube platform, we did a couple of lives, a couple of live sessions regarding learning modalities. And understand, we all have them. We all do, right? There's multiple schools of thought that there are more than just four. I've read research that suggests that there are seven learning modalities, but the big ones that you hear more often, and oftentimes where the other ones either can align themselves or fit closely together, either in the same kind of category or close next to it. Visual learners, kinesthetic learners, visual, kinesthetic, auditory, and tactile. In short, visual. I incorporate information, I gain clarity, and I process information the best watching, right? Maybe I'm that person, and I'll just I'll use myself as an example. I'm that person, and I know some of you are gonna be like, oh, she would drive me nuts, but I am that person. I'm aware of it, try to be mindful of it, but sometimes it gets ahead of me. At Christmas, they'll look at the picture and look at the pictures of the instructions, and then if that doesn't work, then I'll read it because I do better. That's how I incorporate information. Closely to that is kinesthetic. Now, when I first went through the process of assessing and evaluating what my learning process, my learning modality was, it was kinesthetic. Now, as times have passed and research has evolved, kinesthetic and tactile, and they're separate but kind of next to each other. So the difference between kinesthetic and tactile is tactile generally has to do with fine motor. So I need to do like this. Kinesthetic usually means my body needs to be in motion. Example, if a kinesthetic learner, I'll give you an example that happened in college. When I took anatomy and physiology, the teacher had us, we were going through the drop of blood going through the heart in the different chambers. And so he set up these, it wasn't that elaborate, but he marked off areas in the classroom, which was an amphitheater. And so we had to physically walk through, as drops of blood. And that's kinesthetic. It's more than just fine motor skills. It's like almost your whole body, right? And usually kinesthetic learners are phenomenal athletes, obviously, right? You see that obvious connection, but not always. So keeping that in mind, these are pieces of the knowledge that's power that we need to understand, because if I don't understand, like the example I gave of my son yesterday, I'm talking and talking and talking and talking, he's like, when he's two, and understanding that the piece of that parenting, we change and evolve as they grow older. But long story short, he's still not a verbal learner. Mm-mm, not at all. When he did his, my score came visual, kinesthetic / tactile. His was tactile, visual. My daughter's kinesthetic learner. Period. Now she can visual, kinesthetic then visual, but the gap between the two scores was a little wider than mine. So what's my point? My point is, if I don't understand learning modalities, and it doesn't mean that I have to have this education degree, it could be as simple as I just explained it. And who knows best than the people that spend the most time with their children? And usually it's the parents. Now I know that there's a on the continuum of involvement, but a lot of what we need to learn, a lot of what we need to know about these pieces that I'm discussing, we already really kind of know. Kids kind of tell us that as they grow. If I ask you a couple questions, I'm gonna give the same example I gave yesterday. If I ask you a couple questions, you'd be able to answer them. And then if I said what I just asked you was like not an assessment, but what I asked you, the questions I asked you that you answered helps me understand how your child learns. Yeah, I knew that. Of course you did. Of course you did. I have no idea what's happening with the lighting right now. So let's just keep going into it. So as we talk about learning plans, education plans, academic history, that kind of changes, right? As we think about uh, elementary school, middle school, high school. And if your child has an IEP, an individual education plan, if the child is a 504, it's classified as 504, learning disabilities or challenges, and or gifted. These are called exceptional students, right? ESC, exceptional student education. So some places you hear see and I asked students and parents, I said, you hear ESC, what do you think? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Stupid. And I was like, really? Yep, stupid. Dumb, delayed, slow. Those were the words. And I was like, exceptional means none of that. And I was like, wow, language, and not just the language, but how the language is used. Because if I use a word and make it a bad word, I make it something contrary to its actual meaning, then which one's really going to stick? That answer is contingent upon how it's presented. So I asked them, why do you say that? Like, why does dumb and stupid come to mind? Well, because that's what people say when I have to go to my class. That's what people in my family say when we have to go to the meeting for my IEP. Really? Because IEPs, 504s, and gifted are designed to meet the learning needs of students, period. If I want to be successful and everything in the classroom, no shade on the classroom teacher or no shade on me, is not meeting those needs, then what do I need to do? Let's figure out how to fill in the gaps so that you are successful. You have everything you need to be successful. And that is why it's incumbent upon parents who have children who are students who are struggling. You're not going to know if they're struggling if they don't tell you. They're not going to tell you sometimes if they feel some kind of way. It's your responsibility. Your responsibility as a parent to look at where they are. Have those conversations with the principal, with the teachers. Keep contact with them. Put notes to the teacher in the thing. Go through their backpack. Make sure that they're, and mostly, since the time my son was in school, a lot of it was, I could reach out to the teachers in the school via email. And now I have access to their Focus and their Chrome and right? The Chromebook. Access to their Focus through their Chromebook. So I can see the classes and I can see the assignments. I can see the grades up to date. And if I have a question, hey, I know that little Johnny did X, Y, and Z because I helped him. I sat there and said, you might want to rethink that answer. It's not recorded. Now, as your children get older, hopefully in that aging process, we teach them how to self-advocate. So they can say, hey, teacher so-and-so, I turned that in. I don't see a grade. Is there, like, did it get lost? Or, I'm not going to ask them if they got lost, but so they can say, I noticed that I don't have a grade for that. Oh, yeah, I graded it. It's uploading, whatever the case may be. But we have, if your child has an IEP, be sure that you understand what that means, what the school via the Department of Education is responsible for providing, and the fact that you must be present. They need to provide meetings for you so that you are clear on everything, and don't leave the room until you understand everything. That's your child. That school is not going to be paying that tuition for if your child decides to go to college, trade school, or whatever the case may be. If you have to be mama bear and papa bear, that's what you need to do. So find out, FAPE, FAPE, I'll post the resources in the comments later. But do due diligence. If you do a remedial search on IEPs, 504s, and gifted, you'll understand the requirements and how um, 504 is related to the Civil Rights Act. And that's all I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to unpack that because I want you to do that. You need to have that research for yourself. You need to understand how that plays out for yourself. But IEPs, there are requirements that by state regulations that are required to happen, and there excuse me, and there's a sequence once a year that needs to be reviewed. But who's involved, how you qualify, the steps to take to initiate that, all of that is laid out, and accountability is in place. So understand what those things mean. Let me give you this example because we're running about 10 minutes out. But I shared it yesterday and I'll share it again today, but I'll go in a little further detail. I'm going to use the example of the coworker that I had that was talking about their child, and they were talking and saying how I got called again by the school. They hadn't completed this assignment, that assignment. When I come home, they're doing all sorts of different, creative things. They're very creative and physically active, right? So I'm listening. I'm talking, this kid is planking, doing different somersaults and really good at it, right? So I'm just listening. And I think I was washing on a coffee cup. And they were just talking. And they weren't mad, but they were just like, oh, again with the same thing. So I'm just listening. And we did have a relationship. So I want to make sure you understand. I just didn't just bust into the conversation just because I was standing there. So the coworker and I were pretty good. We talked every day and kind of, got to know each other. We're pretty good friends, I think. So it wasn't like an intrusion for me to say, hey, I overheard a little bit. Can I ask a couple questions? And they were like, yes, anything that, can help. So I said, well, I heard you saying that the student is behind or doesn't complete assignments. You keep getting calls from the teacher that, he, whatever. And then when you come home, this is what you see. Yeah, he's lazy. He just won't do his work. Okay, I said, can I ask you a couple questions about that? Because he might not be lazy. She was like, okay. I said, when he gets behind, what does he say? That is, I shouldn't be doing this work. Like, it's stupid. It's stupid work. Okay. I said, what is his scores at the standard test? Because here in Florida, we have the FSA. She was like, he does well every time in the FSA. Okay. I said, when he gets behind, does it take him a long time to get caught up? No, he could do it in a night or a day. But she said he was behind in 3 classes. And then that one night, and when he does the work and he gets caught up, is it, what are the grades like? He gets A's. I said, I have something to say. And she was like, what? I said, I don't think your son's lazy. And she was like, what is it? And I think she may have thought that I was going with a diagnosis or something. And I said, I think your son may be gifted. And she was like, what? And I said, yeah, we don't talk enough about that. And especially inside the culture of the young man that we were discussing. I said, yeah, if their brains aren't stimulated, everything will seem remedial. And the reason why he can do that assignment so fast is because he picked it up quickly. And he's in the classroom waiting for everybody else to do it. No shade on everybody else, and no, for him, that's just what it is. And I said, but make sure though, that's just my rudimentary assessment. But make sure you can have them tested for that. You can have them do a series of assessments to see if he's gifted. But the thing is, this is gonna keep happening. If he doesn't have the right stimulus, if he doesn't have what he needs to stay engaged, you're gonna keep seeing what you're seeing. But I'm telling you, he's not lazy. I don't know. Lazy is different. That's a different animal. It may look like that, but that's not. And I gave her information, like I gave her resources and links, and I printed off some stuff so that she could further explore it with her husband and her child. But if we don't know, though, that's the point of this. Knowledge is power. If I don't understand, but how do you do that? What are the possibilities? Have that conversation with the teacher. All teachers should be aware of what it means to be gifted, whether the school offers it or not, right? To make sure that you as a parent are able to provide your child as much as they need to be successful within their learning modalities, within their ability to retain, secure, and regurgitate information. But if the point is learning, And we need to look at the best ways that our students learn, the best ways that our children learn, the best ways that our nieces and nephews learn, right? Um, the other thing to keep in mind when we're looking at learning modalities is temperament. Because if me not getting it right away escalates my mood in the sense of, because that was me growing up. I got things rather quickly, right? But there's certain subjects that I didn't. And it was like a square thought going into a round hole. And instead of having patience and being kind, I didn't want to be singled out with my classmates that I struggled in this area. Please don't call on me because I am trying to figure this out, but don't call on me because then that, so just the aspect of me being cognizant of they're going to call on me, they're going to call on me, they're going to call on me, shut down the part that should be learning the information, right? So as I'm thinking about this, please don't call me. I decided I hated that subject. And once I hated it, just like people, once I don't like you, what can you do? If you've done something that makes me like, okay. But if I've made a decision that I don't like you, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to bring that back. Nothing. That's what happened with that subject. There was no comeback. But when I understand, if my parents understood learning modalities and temperament and personality and the best way to navigate that. Now I know that there are people listening like, that's too much work. I ain't doing that. Them children need to sit in the classroom and do what the teacher says. Okay. That's classroom management. That's not education. Doing what the teacher says, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but I'm talking about education and learning. I'm talking about what do my kids need? I remember my first practical experience with what I'm talking about right now is I remember I was in fourth grade and the teacher was teaching some kind of math, some kind of addition thing. And she put the equation up in multiple ways. She put, I'm just going to say 4 plus 4. I don't know what the actual equation was, but 4 plus 4, long ways. 4 plus 4, vertical. Then she put circles. And she put little beans on her desk. Because some people just know how to do it in their head. And I love that. My grandfather could do that. And including the tax. I was like, but then some people had to touch. You see the learning modalities that are happening now? See that? So understanding those things, but then how it puts things in perspective when we're adding to the situation by learning and knowing what IEPs are and what 504s are and what gifted means and the money that is submitted to the schools by the Department of Education for these services. And so therefore, if your child fits into one of these categories and they are identified as receiving them, which means monies are coming, make sure you are getting what they are paying for. Gifted is a whole curriculum. Gifted teachers have to be identified as gifted teachers, meaning there are requirements. I think it's a certification, but there are requirements that are needed in order for them to be identified as gifted teachers to have gifted students. Knowledge is power. Know what these things are and understand that your 504 and your IEP can go all the way through college, whether you use it or not. These are accommodations that help you towards success. Understand what these things mean. Understand what the learning modalities are. Just watch your child and they'll be able to demonstrate it, right? The bottom line is, how can we advocate without proper information and proper clarity? How can we do that? You know, the best advocates have the most accurate information, the most timely information, the most current information, and they have the pieces and intersecting pieces to understand the strategy and planning, all that's involved toward the pursuit and accountability and recourse of those in those places of administering these types of education, making sure that you have the information that you need, etc. And not just inside education. Understand that this segment is not to put down or throw shade on teachers and schools and school systems. No, what I'm saying is we need to do due diligence as parents. We need to make sure that we have information necessary at our fingertips, whether we have it. I know what this means if I say fake, you know what I'm talking about, or I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna look it up. Knowing where to go and how to secure that information. What does that look like? Go in the backpack, go to the portal, check out their Chromebook. For us, it's Focus. There are different ways to access your child's academic information real time, right? Request parent teacher meetings. Get involved with SAC, right? What's A stand for? Student something council. Student advisory council. That's it. Um, those are meetings with parents and teachers and principal and whatever they talk about retention. They talk about different programs in the class. They talk about concerns that parents have. Get involved. Volunteer if you can. Um, Host different things if you can. But if you can't, then at least go on the backpack. At least send a note to the teacher. At least make sure, like, whenever something comes home and it says, "Would you like, like a progress note at the bottom says, would you like a meeting with the teacher?" Yes, I would. And half the time it's like, "Hey, I just want to meet you," and that's the end of it. Because when something happens, when parents have faces, something happens. I worked in a nursing home. Something happens when residents have families. Something happens. Dynamics change a little bit. And it's not, again, I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying that what they say, the early bird catches the worm, but who are they going to remember? I remember your mom. That goes both ways. And my child, I know who your mom is. Oh, shoot. Okay, let me get it together. And then, oh, I know who her mom is. But that's not the point. The point of meeting teachers is not to put them on check and not to put my child on check. It's to make sure that the teacher knows that I'm here. I'm on a team. I have my jersey on. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Put me in. You have support at home. But understand that support is focused on my child first and you second. So if I know what your game plan is or what you expect, I'll facilitate that at home. So then we have this wraparound thing. So my children know they can't pull nothing off over the teacher because they got me, and they're not gonna pull anything off on me academically because I got them. And that's when our children are most successful, the most successful. So we are at 32 minutes. I want to make sure that you have your at homework and then recap for the theme for next week. So your at homework, I mentioned it earlier that if you have not watched an episode of Schoolhouse Rock, that is your assignment. I grew up with that playing regularly on the TV, so it came out in the 60s, early 70s. So your at homework is to watch an episode of Schoolhouse Rock, any episode at all. I think we have the DVD set, so I don't remember how many quote unquote seasons there are, but there's several that talk about history, math, geography, language, crosses the continuum. So just pick one. Part of the theme is as your body grows bigger, your mind must flower. It's great to learn because knowledge is power. I wanted to say that part as we wrap up. Okay, so as we transition into another week, be sure to if you I'm not gonna give you the option. Be sure to think about at least one thing that you're grateful for, a reflection of this week. Remember that next week's topic is trauma storage sites. We're gonna unpack that a little bit, see that wordplay there. But be kind to yourself that you may be kind to others, and as always, speak life.